Yeah.
But Alex is our Resilium head of product development. And he calls himself now part-time consultant and trainer because he likes to make sure that he is a lot of product development in barrier management. Alex is currently working on our Swiss knife, how to call it, risk runner middleware solution so that we can just do wise data things with making sure that these barriers can be measured more easily. He started as the product manager for Bowtie XP. If you have some questions about, hey, but why is this built in this Bowtie XP software? It's his fault. Yeah. So that's why he decided to move on to being a software developer with product manager as a side role, and he has been the senior HSE data and reporting, senior HSE data and reporting specialist for Schiphol. Just also having created a direct line of sight on all the critical risks, not all, but many of the critical risks in Schiphol. So, and I like, when I was thinking about you, you like to make the academic practical.
Very good.
Yeah?
Yes, yeah,
That's
nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And, well, I would say I'll stop quickly so that you can do your thing. Thanks.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. So I was hoping to interact a bit more with you, but I'm keeping my distance. Yeah. What I wanted to talk about, psychological safety and then in safety. So how does psychological safety work in relation to the field of safety? I tried to gather some thoughts on it, do some reading on it. The reason why I got interested in it were some experiences I had where I was trying at a company to help them monitor barrier performance, and we got some nice results and we started reporting them, and then the response from management was to just go fix it, which very quickly sort of got in the way of people reporting accurately, which really pissed me off a little bit. Because that's of course not how you want to do it. And so this psychological safety was interesting because perhaps there's something there to make it, let's say, perhaps you need it to make this whole barrier monitoring stuff work, right? At least a consideration of it. It's a hot buzzword. I'm not sure if people here have had anything to do with it. But I think the reason why it got really popular is because of Google. So they did a research study for a couple of years called Project Aristotle, and the project was really around trying to determine what makes a high-performing team. So they saw within Google, like some teams were performing super well, some teams were not performing so well, and so they thought like, oh, we should really research like why are some teams doing really well and some teams are not. And so they looked at a bunch of different things. So perhaps people have come across things like if you have a team, you need to make sure that there are different types of characters in it. Like you need a guy who's very extrovert, and then you need an introvert. You need like a nice balance of that. Or like a blue, yellow type color, different colored people. All of that turns out to be complete nonsense. Doesn't matter at all for what makes a good team. They did a long study, and they found out that basically the only thing that really mattered to make a team perform well is that members speak in roughly the same proportion. So like every team member has roughly the same amount of speaking time, let's say. And the members are skilled at intuiting how others feel. So they're really good at like telling if somebody's not feeling well, or they, like me, or and they still force you to come. Yeah. Yeah. No, you have to be here. Yeah. After this. But basically these two things. So like roughly same proportion, and then good at intuiting if people are not feeling too well. And that led them to sort of make the connection to this field of psychological safety, which is this is Amy Edmondson. She's sort of the grandmother, I guess, of psychological safety. One of the big, I would say the leading researcher in this field. So psychological safety is defined by her as a climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. So now the whole Google thing was is more on the innovation side of things, right? So it's about how do you get a team to be innovative, and then this turns out to be almost like the number one determining factor. So how do you measure this psychological safety? That's a really nice thing. There's a really standardized 7 questions that is a validated questionnaire to determine if a team is psychologically safe. And so what I want to do, QR code, interactive presentation. It's the best. And so just fill out these questions in terms of like the team you're in, like just imagine one of the teams you're in and if you're feeling particularly psychologically safe.
Does it have to be honest?
Yes, of course it has to be honest. It's anonymous, so you can be honest.
Okay. You should lie. Just put the QR code.
Sorry, again? The QR code again?
Oh, I was speaking about this team.
Well, I mean, it's like just pick a team. You can pick your own team. I think that's more relevant, of course, to pick your work team, your close.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would say Ted looks great.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty good. It's a nice distribution. I mean, but people fill it in still. Okay. I think this is sort of it. So not too bad. Like most people are actually filling it in quite extremely, and then there's a couple areas where people feel less psychologically safe. And then okay, there's like some areas here where people are not super psychologically safe. I think one of the things you can take home with you is that this seven questions are like a scientifically validated questionnaire. So this is a solid questionnaire to measure psychological safety. So now moving on to as it relates to safety. There's a bunch of safety incidents where you can argue that psychological safety had a big role. So like a Challenger where they had the O-rings and people try to voice concerns, but it was completely ignored. Tenerife, a very classical example, of course, where a pilot, like the junior pilots, were afraid to mention information to the senior pilot because of this hierarchy, leading to crew resource management. Crew resource management, in a way, I think, is actually a psychological safety program, right? So, like, I haven't included too much in the talk today about it, but crew resource management definitely, like, psychological safety avant la lettre, almost. Chernobyl, like, you could argue, of course, this introduced safety culture in the world, but you could argue psychological safety played a big role in this incident as well. So, like, what are some examples where we would think like psychological safety plays a role in safety? So, if you talk about reporting incidents, near misses, or barrier performance, like that people feel safe doing that. Thinking about speaking up about procedures that don't work instead of, like, sometimes your procedures just don't work for reality. And you want people to be able to speak up about it and to say, like, hey, what you're saying, that, like, the way this is written just doesn't really work. But then also that this is basically what I started with, like managers responding in the wrong way when people do speak up, and it's them slapping down. All of those are, I think, areas within safety where this psychological safety has an impact. So this Amy Edmondson came up with this leader's toolkit for building psychological safety. It has 3 parts: framing the work, inviting participation, and then responding productively. And I'll give a little bit of what I try to do is pick out, like, what are the actual practical things you might do. Because, like, psychological safety is nice, but with all these, like, high-level concepts, it has a tendency to stay high level and, like, okay, like, what do we actually do with it? So for framing the work, I want to mention intelligent procedures, which we briefly mentioned also in February, but I think it has a place here as well. Framing the work is about, like, setting the right expectations so that people know that for certain areas it is okay to fail, for certain areas it's not okay to fail. And so intelligent procedures is a nice example. If you think about it, over time organizations tend to implement more and more procedures, which makes it more and more likely for people to violate the procedures because they have less and less maneuvering ability. So, like, what you consider a violation becomes, like, increasingly more behavior becomes a violation as you add more and more procedures. This is a picture from James Reason, like, super old picture, but I think it's still valid. Like, as you have incidents and so you continue adding more and more procedures, but then you need some of that wiggle room sometimes to get the job done. And so at some point you have this procedure obesity creeping in where you have more and more procedures. So what you could do, or like what this intelligent procedures thing is trying to do, is to say, let's take out some of the procedures and leave a little bit. Oh, the mute. Ah, this is much better. Oh, we should have done this minutes ago. Sorry. Okay, so.
Good example.
Yeah, you were pointing at it, and I think. Sorry. Okay, continue. All right, so usually procedures are considered very strict, so you should basically follow them and not deviate from them. Where you could also say, well, what if we introduce this language for procedures where we really have some parts that are very strict and you have to adhere to them. You have to sort of say A, B, C. You cannot deviate from that, otherwise bad stuff will happen. Then there's sections where you have some options. So you have an assist sections where you have you can choose 1, 2, or 3. It's up to you depending on circumstances. And then there's some expertise guideline sections where it's a lot more goal oriented. So you're saying this is way too variable. There's too many factors for us to really pin down or describe this in a strict way. We're going to give you more of a guideline
and give you boundaries to work in. And then you have to figure it out based on local conditions. So for this last part especially, psychological safety is both like a precondition, but also this is where you can create some psychological safety and give some responsibility back to people doing the work. Of course, you can, like we think about this, like perhaps you do need to have some, for instance, a competency requirement where you say like only people with a certain competency can actually do this, right? So you give them the freedom, more freedom based on their competency level. I think this might be a good idea. But yeah, this is sort of framing the work with this intelligent procedure. This is an idea, let's say, of how you could practically implement it. Inviting participation is the second part. So this breaks apart, I think, in two concrete things. One is a humble inquiry, and then a safety action team. Humble Inquiry is like a nice book by a classic guy on organizational culture, Schrein. Humble Inquiry is about being humble and inquiring. So it's essentially, this is especially true for leaders and the way that they communicate to other people. And so the humble part is about feeling that you're dependent on someone else to accomplish a task or goal. So you don't, the point he is trying to make is that in our culture, especially Western culture, there's a lot of focus on like individual accomplishment and like showing your knowledge. Like you're basically, if you can show that you know something that's considered valuable in our culture, it's less valuable if I'm just good at asking you a question and letting you talk. That's somehow considered less valuable, right, in our culture. So he's saying like we should be asking more instead of telling. That's sort of the pitch of this book. A nice way that Amy Edmondson puts this is that you want to be a don't knower. So a lot of people are very uncomfortable with saying they don't know something. And so especially if you're a leader, you want to sort of coach them a little bit to be comfortable saying, I don't know. At least like 5 times a day you should be able to say, I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of people have difficulty with that. And especially if it's not if you're a leader and you do this, that creates psychological safety because it opens the door for other people also to not know something. Okay. Then the inquiry part, he's talking about like you want to have some genuine curiosity about the other person. So you don't want to sort of, it's possible for you to ask a closed question or like lead somebody. You're asking questions, but you're still like sort of infusing it with your opinion. He's saying like you want to be very open to what the other person actually has to say. This is a little bit like the humble inquiry is very interesting, I think. It's a little bit about like how a leader should be communicating with people that he's leading. The safety action team is also nice. I feel like this is perhaps also important in the context of barrier performance or critical control management, where you want to, within the team where people are reporting on barriers, you want to make sure that they are psychologically safe, so that they feel comfortable reporting. So Schrein, for instance, has this concept of a cultural island, because you don't need the whole organization to be psychologically safe. Like the finance department can be psychologically super unsafe, as long as the safety people are psychologically safe. That's okay. Like that's doable. I think that's a really important point. Like that, it's not required. You don't need the whole organization to be psychologically safe. You can create a single team within it and make sure that one is psychologically safe, right? And so I think that's an important point, which otherwise it just wouldn't work. Like it would just become too big. Yeah, okay. And then the last part, responding productively, I think this is really where my frustration sometimes with the managers comes, where they, of course, if you see that there's some red being reported, you want to do something about it. but not start with like, you should have done a better job. You want to sort of thank you for speaking up. That's my first reaction, and then we can go into doing something about it. Eon, sometimes like in the past, have done things where if you tell me your barrier is failing, I'll give you some resources to go fix them. It's like it's not a slap in the face. Like, I'm gonna give you money to fix a problem if you tell me, which is a much better. Like, it's a good incentive. So you want to also destigmatize failure, of course, so sort of that it's okay for somebody, and that a manager is not. Like, sometimes the red in a report is like a bull, like I don't know. Like, I feel perhaps managers need to be trained a little bit to not overreact when they see something being red. But of course, this is also important. If there is a clear violation of something, it should still be possible to sanction it. Yeah. That's an important, of course, point. It's not like a free-for-all and we're also happy together. Like, if you're clearly in violation of something, that still needs sanctioning. Little reading list here. I think these 3 things are a nice follow-up reading, especially this New York Times article. You can just read it online, and gives a really nice overview of psychological safety and what the research they did. And I think this Amy Edmondson book, or like this her main book, is also a really good read if you want to know more about it. Okay, so I hope I gave you some, at least you have a little bit of an idea what psychological safety is. That's it. Any questions? Yeah.
So what I think was the cultural island, was it?
Yeah.
So you said it would also be. Can you expand a little bit? What do you foresee then? Will it be like one department?
Or a team? Yeah, I mean a group of people. I think the bigger the group, the more tricky it will become, of course. But I think let's imagine you have, for instance, a barrier performance team or critical control management team. Yeah. Then I think it's important that the person leading that is sort of admits that he doesn't know stuff and like creates this psychological safety. And then within the people that are in that team, they should feel psychologically safe. So let's imagine the other way around. If they don't feel psychologically safe, it's an impediment to the project, or like a risk to the success of the project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Did you say accounting that's support?
No, sorry. I was commenting on the fact that if it's a requirement for psychological safety to work that the whole organization is psychologically safe, then it makes it much more difficult, right? But what he's saying is like you can create small pockets within the organization and make them psychologically safe, and you don't need the rest of the organization to be psychologically safe to have any psychological safety, right? You can create a pocket. That's his point.
It should still be a goal, I think.
Yeah, of course, yes, that's true. But sometimes I feel like it can be very demoralizing if you feel like, oh shit, like I have a company of 20,000 people, and now the only way this will work is if they're all feeling psychologically safe, right? So let's say that's not an excuse. You can start small, and then of course you want to be an inspiration to the rest of the organization and have it spread. But you can start small and work out from there. Let's say, yeah.
I think it's really important that the workforce feels itself psychologically safe. I mean, we sit in a nice environment.
Yeah.
Well educated, verbally we can express what we think.
Yeah.
And we see a lot that the workforce that they have withheld themselves in voicing their concerns.
Yeah.
Dual fault, that they are afraid that they will end up in a discussion that they cannot win, and otherwise that perhaps their future appointment comes into
Yeah.
There's also a reason that we sometimes hear. So I think it's really important that we make sure that these people have the or receive the skills to speak up and feel safe to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my experience with the client I was helping, where like I was trying to convince people, oh, please just tell me the real issues. Like, don't worry if it's red. Like, just tell me what's really going on. And then like from up top down, there's like a slap down. It's terrible. Yeah.
How do you make the comparison between departments then? Because I agree with you, you have to start small.
Yeah.
But once one department is psychologically safe, you see more of their dirty laundry, as I said.
Yeah, yeah.
And that means more focus from the higher managers, but that this connects to the psychological safety.
Yeah. So, but I think like if like it's very difficult if you're creating this little island, but then from top management down it starts to like pollute.
You see more. So
Yeah.
if you give it attention, you see more and more
Yeah.
things that go wrong,
Yeah.
which you can improve, of course, which is the main goal.
Yeah.
But if you interpret it in the wrong way, you see only faults.
Yeah. No, I think like one part is that like there should be some type of firewall a little bit, so to protect them.
It's a linking pin, I think. So
Yeah.
the one in contact with the higher management or whatever other stakeholders.
Exactly. They absorb the dirt. Let's say they absorb the fire. Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah.
Solution for that is if you bring somebody from third party into the organization to create that island, and also this person is then the mayor of the island.
Yeah.
Currently is like a confidential person.
And of course, I think to link to your point, like you should probably try to go as high as possible, as quickly as possible with like making psychological safety a thing. Yeah, of course, there's practical limitations sometimes, but yeah, the higher up you can get, the better it is, probably. Yeah.
It's appreciated on that level.
Exactly, that makes it much easier, of course. Yeah, but I think like even if it's not, like making like a little isolated group, and if you have like a manager that can absorb the impact, let's say, should do it. Yeah, I mean otherwise it won't work. I will also probably, right? I can't see how it would work otherwise.
You can probably use it in your organization. Well, the 7
Questions? Yeah, 7 questions.
Really
Yeah.
quick to do.
Yeah.
But you could use it to identify areas of concern.
Yeah,
So you can
definitely.
Look into them further.
Yeah.
And see where you can improve.
Yeah. I think the 7 questions, like you take them home, like they're great. You could just like give them to a team and sort of have an assessment of like hoe staat de vlag ervoor? How's the flag hanging?
Safety audit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Lucas?
Is there anything into research in terms of if you work with third parties on psychological safety?
Oh, so I've not read specific research on like contractors and stuff like that. You mean? So like it's important. Like the whole psychological safety thing is team oriented. Like as I mentioned, I'm not sure. So the short answer is no. I haven't read it, but I'm also not sure. Like it's just a team. So if that includes contractors or not. There's some extra complications, of course, but
I think when you look at the project.
Yeah.
So you had the chart, but what was the scale?
I just plotted all the questions, like it's just counting the scores for all the different questions. I didn't actually like calculate the overall score. It was just to give just an impression of like the spread.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was not.
So the further right.
Yeah, this is 5. Agree or whatever.
Yeah. So it's an increase.
Do you notice like the questions are vice versa, like that's it on purpose, of course. Those psychologists. Yeah.
So the questions, are they Western based or do they apply to all sorts of cultures?
So the point they make in the book, like of course, if in certain cultures, like a Japanese culture, for instance, where there's a lot more like a hierarchy, like built into the culture, it's a bit more of an uphill battle. But there's counter examples, like for instance Toyota, who have their like a lean blah blah, where throughout the entire chain of from high to low, people can give concerns, and for Toyota it works really well. So even if, like on a cultural level, there might be some like more challenging things in certain cultures, it's still possible, right?
Toyota, it's a Japanese company, so people are alike.
Yeah.
What happens
if you have a more... I don't know. It's very psychologically safe. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Maybe I can help here. So, I mean, we've also developed a questionnaire, a bit more than 7 questions, based on international measurement of groups of people, so culture. Mm-hmm. If I look at these questions, I'm looking at do a quick scan of these group of people, right? The questions are rather direct, and they're rather focused on the individual. So as you already rightfully mentioned, I think in the Western world, the Dutch, the Swedish, the Anglo-Saxon world in general, it will probably be okay. You can get at least some indication out of it, whether people feel psychologically safe or not. Mm-hmm. I think if you go the rest of the world, because you mentioned Japan as a hierarchical country, well, don't forget we here are the exception. The rest of the world, starting in Belgium, is already more hierarchical. Yeah, you're joking actually, right? And people, sorry?
You like the Belgian one?
I'm married to a Japanese, so I know what it's like. Yeah. So people will be more reluctant, not impossible, but be more reluctant to answer these direct questions as I'm feeling safe or not. Yeah. There are other ways around it. You come to me if you're interested in it. Otherwise, these 7 questions, they will work. At least it gives you some indication. But across the globe, if you really have a more international or more hierarchical team, I would say treat these answers carefully.
With a grain of salt. I think like in general, right? Like surveys, there's some danger in it.
Unless you know what to answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
And looking at the figure, maybe the hint, there are some open jobs or maybe for different companies like us. So if we look to the zero there.
Yeah, exactly. There's some work still, yeah.
Do you happen to know if someone would be interested in having additional training on this, where they might get that?
Well, I mean, we can do something if you're looking for it. So this is part of us like diving into this topic, of course. So we are. And I think this is for us, and like the stuff we do, I think it's important to make sure that the whole package works. So yeah, definitely.
You say that if you're interested in it, for example, just gave you a couple of answers to this.
Yeah.
Her company Coca Blue, I think, specializes in this as well.
In culture in general, So psychological safety is a part. If you're interested in trading and culture, just come to me. Or ask one of the Resilium guys, they know where to find me. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm already over time, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for.
Cheers.
Yeah.